Chapter 3. On the way home, Don's cell phone rang. He grinned when he saw the caller ID. "Hello, Aunt Cynthia."
"I saw the news,"
she said.
"The murder. Isn't Farrington your old neighborhood?"
"Yes, Aunt Cynthia." His grin faded.
"Anyone you know hurt?"
How to answer that? Sort of. Aunt Cynthia, Mom's sister, used to watch him and Ethan when they were toddlers. He had fond memories of going to her house during his childhood. She watched Jordan every now and then as well. She did not know about Connor.
"Sort of. Oh dear."
She paused.
"Who is it?"
Don sighed. "Aunt Cynthia, you're probably going to be mad when you hear this, but Ethan had a son." Her ear-piercing scream made Don pull the phone away. At first, he thought her reaction was too much. And then he realized his mistake. "Oh no, Ethan's son is fine. His mom's boyfriend was killed." He waited.
"Oh, praise Jesus,"
she finally replied.
"Poor Ethan."
She fell into a long silence as she remembered all the time she spent with him.
"He didn't deserve what happened to him."
Don bit his lip.
"So why am I just now hearing about the boy?"
she asked.
"What's his name?"
"It's Connor, and..." How to proceed? "I just found out about him myself," he lied.
"God damn it, Don," Monica yelled. "You want me to lie to your aunt?"
They sat in the kitchen while the kids played in Jordan's room. Don had told his wife about the conversation he'd just had on the way home. "You've been lying to her for years already," he said, though he knew that would only make things worse.
"I never lied to her," she countered. "I just never told her about Connor. She never asked. If she had, I would have told her."
"Even though I asked you not to?" Monica stared at her husband for a moment, and then said,
"Why did you want to keep him a secret from your family in the first place?"
"It's complicated. Since Ethan and Ivy hadn't married, none of the family knew about her. Even at the funeral, no one knew she was carrying his baby. They'd all thought she was just a friend of his." Monica shook her head.
"Always that same excuse," she muttered. "Don, I love you, but I don't like knowing you're keeping secrets from me. I don't like it at all."
He looked out the kitchen window, to the backs of the neighboring houses. "Ethan kept his other life private, even from me. I wanted to respect that." That was mostly true, so he didn't mind saying it to his wife. She nodded, seeming to accept it.
"And now Aunt Cynthia wants to meet Connor?" she asked.
"Yep. Should be fun." He couldn't have been more sarcastic if he tried. Aunt Cynthia lived 20 minutes away, in a nice, hilly neighborhood near the army base where Don and Ethan were born. Don always loved riding through as a kid, and doing so now made him feel 10 years old again. Monica sat in the passenger seat of the SUV, with the kids riding in the back. Don couldn't believe how well the boys were getting along. It was as if they'd discovered some kind of bond. Don wasn't sure how to feel about that. He parked in front of his aunt's 2-story house, and the family marched up a large brick staircase that led to the front door. Don rang the doorbell and was greeted with a loud, "Come in." He opened the door, where he met 2 sets of carpeted stairs, one leading down and the other leading up. He chose up, which could be considered the ground floor, even though it looked like the second. This house was one of the most unusual he had ever seen. The kitchen and living room were up here, along with 2 bedrooms, the master and another room. Downstairs, there were another bedroom and a den. Aunt Cynthia moved into this house when Don was around 5 years old. He actually remembered the day, and it was one of the earliest memories he had. When he got to the top of the steps, he saw Aunt Cynthia pop out of the kitchen with a large wooden spoon in one hand. "Hey!" she called in her strong, loud voice. She looked from Dawn to the kids and back. To Dawn, she said, "Boy, look at you, all grown." Dawn grinned. She said that every time she saw him. She gushed over how big Jordan was getting as well before setting a wary sight on Connor. "He looks just like Ethan," she said to no one in particular. To Dawn, she said, "My babies, having babies." "Aunt Cynthia, I'm 31. "Good Lord, you're that old?" She laughed as she quickly checked on whatever she was cooking and invited him to have a seat on her white floral couch. The living room was beautifully decorated, with paintings and plants and tiny angel baby porcelain baubles. Aunt Cynthia joined them on the couch moments later. Dawn guessed she was cooking some kind of soup or stew. It smelled delicious. "If you're 31, Aunt Cynthia continued, "then I don't even want to know how old I am." Dawn and Monica laughed. Cynthia didn't look bad for her age. Her once black hair, now mostly gray, was pulled back in a slight ponytail. Dawn didn't know how old she was, and didn't dare venture a guess out loud. Cynthia stared at Connor, who stared back. He was leaning against Monica's legs, partly standing and sitting at the same time. "Ethan was always such a strange boy," Cynthia mused. "But he was still my baby. You both were." She looked at Dawn again. "Connor's a little like his daddy," said Dawn, even though he never met him. Cynthia nodded knowingly, causing Dawn to wonder if they were having some kind of secret conversation. Did she know about the curse? Sounds of laughter and play came from the den downstairs. Despite the fact that there was a liquor bar down there, the kids tended to play in that room often. Thankfully, the liquor was under lock and key. "So," Cynthia said, "you now have 2 kids. Are you prepared for that?" Don looked to his wife, who nodded, and then said to his aunt, "Absolutely." "If you ever need me to watch them both, I won't charge you extra for it." "Thanks, Aunt Cynthia." The thought of Connor around other children worried Don, but there was nothing he could do about it. If he was going to help the boy, he needed to give him as normal a life as possible. Stability was the key. "Who all's here?" Monica asked, indicating the ruckus downstairs. "Oh, Robert, Shannon, Teresa, and a few new faces. They must have just woken up from their naps." "Let's go meet some kids," Monica said to Jordan and Connor. They nodded. Everyone went downstairs, passing a washer and dryer located in a nook under the stairs. Don always felt like he was going underground when he came down here. The den was at the end of the hall, across from the laundry nook. 6 kids, all about the age of 5, ran around the room like they were high on sugar. Half of them were African American, the other Caucasian. Don had spent all of his childhood surrounded by black people that he almost felt like one himself. He often joked to Monica that he was only attracted to black women. Connor and Jordan joined the other kids. Don looked out through the curtained back porch door to get a view of the beautiful backyard, which sloped downhill to a dense wooded area. He remembered all the times he and his aunt played badminton in that yard. Sometimes her other children, both older than Don, would join in. Ethan had even played. "Honey," said Monica, "you okay?" Don wiped his eyes quickly as he turned to face her. "Yeah, I'm fine." He wasn't fine, though. His chest hurt. The pain and guilt over his brother's death was more than he could bear. He knew that his wife could see it on his face. He was so lucky to have Monica. He would die without her. but he would lose her someday if he kept secrets. Yet he may lose her if she found out the truth. Damned if he did, damned if he didn't. When Cynthia walked them to the door moments later, Dawn looked across the street. "I still can't believe you live across from a graveyard." "It's just a little one," she replied. 7 graves or so. When I was a kid, I used to have nightmares that zombies would rise up and cross over here to get me." "Just you?" Monica laughed. "Yep. In a large house full of people, they would only want me." He grew serious. "I would look down at them from one of those windows." He pointed to the living room windows above. It was terrifying. "Well," said Cynthia, "for as long as I've lived here, there haven't been many zombies." Dawn smiled. "That's reassuring." He had nightmares that night, the kind that froze you with complete terror. In the dream, he was a kid, no more than 10 years old. He was looking out from Cynthia's windows to see zombies shambling across the street and up the brick steps to her front door. Ethan was among them. The sight was horrible on that moonlit night, and though Dawn tried to keep an eye on his dead brother, he kept losing sight of him. At one point, Dawn ran to the kitchen window and saw Ethan standing on the deck in the backyard, looking up at him. And then Ethan disappeared when Dawn blinked. But when he turned around in the narrow kitchen, he saw Ethan standing in the adjoining dining room, in the dark, just standing there, making no sound. Somehow, Dawn willed himself awake and found that he was covered in cold sweat. Monica lay sound asleep next to him. His heart raced and he couldn't imagine going back to sleep just yet, so he booted up the computer across the room and silently added to his manuscript. He wrote about the nightmare while it was still fresh in his mind. After he was done, he saved and closed the file. He never bothered to lock his computer. Truthfully, he hoped Monica would read the rough draft and figure out his secrets. He had trouble initiating that particular conversation with her, but once the floodgates opened. The family had breakfast together that Sunday morning, Don cooking his well-regarded sausage, eggs, biscuits, and grits, just the way his father used to. It was hard to believe it had only been less than 2 days since Lewis's bloody death. Jordan and Connor sat with their heads close together, whispering to each other. "This year's family reunion is going to be interesting," Monica said, tilting her head toward Connor. "I'm already dreading the onslaught of questions my aunts and uncles are going to ask," Don joked as he suddenly grew nervous. The semi-annual reunion was only 2 weeks away, and he honestly feared his family's reaction to Ethan's love child. Don had to prepare for a lot of things now that he had a second child. He hadn't even planned to have one kid. He and Ethan had ended up in the same boat 5 months apart, but Don didn't regret the turn his life had taken. He looked upon his wonderful wife and son and considered himself much luckier than he deserved to be.